I'll leave the kid with you. Take care." I wondered what he meant by that. Then Asher blurted out something outrageous. It turns out he's been living with his affair partner, taking advantage of our separation. When my mother passed away, he wanted to cut ties with me and marry her. Living separated is almost like being divorced. I didn't care and hung up the phone. 3 days later, I saw 23 missed calls from Ash on my phone. Thinking it wouldn't be anything worthwhile, I didn't respond and blocked his number. But Asher was persistent. He even messaged me on social media, which he usually doesn't use. That's when I decided to fight back against Asher. "Fine, if that's how you want it. I'll show you hell." Asher, who didn't bother to attend his mother-in-law's funeral and even had an affair planning to elope, deserved no sympathy. I decided to pay him back more than twice for everything he had done to us. My name is Emily. I'm a 46-year-old part-time housewife. My family consists of my husband, Asher, a year older than me, and our 16-year-old daughter, Mila, a freshman in high school. We live in a small apartment in a rural area. We got married when I was 23, but found out I was infertile after 5 years of fertility treatment. We were finally blessed with our long-awaited daughter. However, I struggled with the new parenting responsibilities, gradually losing my mental space. I quit my job at the time and became a housewife temporarily. In today's society, whenever Mila got sick, I, her mother, was called to accompany her to the hospital. This was what led me to quit my job. It wasn't that I hated caring for Mila, but after being indirectly asked to resign by my boss, I couldn't take it and ran away. Eventually, staying at home all the time seemed depressing, so I started earning a bit by working part-time. Neither Asher nor I could forget the hardship of 5 years of fertility treatment, and we settled on just having Mila as our only child. Not wanting more, I noticed Asher's strange behavior around the time Mila was in her later years of elementary school. Mila was a good student, and I desperately wanted her to take the private middle school entrance exams. Mila was positive about the idea, and we visited open campuses together to decide which school was best. Asher earned enough to support us even if I was a full-time housewife. For Mila's education funds, I planned to use my savings from before marriage and untouched earnings from my part-time job if necessary. However, Asher was adamantly against it, refusing to allow Mila's exams. What's the point of middle school exams? Just send her to a regular middle school. That's enough for Mila. Aren't those exams for daughters of company presidents or something? No matter how much I tried to persuade him, Asher stubbornly refused to agree. Finally, losing my patience, I told Mila, "You can take the exams. Your mom wants to support what you want to do. You should study for the exams without worrying about anything." However, Mila shook her head with an apologetic look. Mila probably hated seeing her parents argue over her future. That's when I first realized it wasn't right to expose our child to such stress. We shouldn't expose our children to this kind of behavior. For Mila's sake, I decided to be extra careful not to get into intense arguments with Asher. This was the start of walking on eggshells around Asher. But the more I tried to be considerate, the more sensitive I became, and even trivial things led to minor arguments. You know, I've been meaning to say this for a while, but isn't this stew a bit too salty? I've always hated this kind of seasoning. Asher suddenly confessed that he had never liked my cooking. It seemed like the argument we had about the exams had unleashed all restraints. From that point on, he ignored my feelings completely, criticizing everything bluntly. He'd nag about his dislike for Worcestershire sauce or how he always hated the tomatoes I added to his lunchbox. His comments during meals made me feel awful. Reluctantly, I stopped adding tomatoes for color and omitted carrots after he said he didn't like them. Then he complained, "Your lunches lack color and are so unappetizing that I don't want them anymore," and threw them away. I had had enough of his constant complaints, so I finally snapped. "Then eat out if you're going to complain so much. I won't make your lunch ever again." and from that moment I stopped making Asher's lunches altogether. Then came the next turning point. It was when Mila, attending a public middle school, was about to enter high school. Mila had joined an archery club outside of school, which she had wanted to do, and achieved the honor of participating in a national competition. She was also good at studying and playing the piano, which I had her learn as a hobby. She always looked forward to her weekly piano lessons. Mila was a girl who could handle anything gracefully, serving as the vice president of the student council at school. Though we had given up on middle school exams to avoid causing her stress, this time I wanted to support her in attending the high school of her choice. When I asked about her future path, she named a famous private high school in the city. I wasn't sure whether to say it, but I really want to go here. It's also a prestigious school for archery, and I'm going to work hard, Mila said, and I wholeheartedly agreed. Mila had always put herself last, being considerate of her father, Asher. She would decline offers for books or clothes she wanted, saying, "It's okay," and looked guilty even when receiving them as birthday gifts. As a mother, it filled me with a sense of helplessness to see my child like this. That's why I wanted to make her dream come true. We have my savings and the education insurance, so it'll be okay, I encouraged Mila. But I had to inform Asher, and as expected, he flatly refused. When I conveyed Mila's choice, a private high school in the city, "That's not feasible from here. That means she'd have to stay in a dorm or an apartment by herself. I won't allow it. It's a waste of money," he said. I was outraged by his words. To call the educational expenses for our only daughter a waste, I couldn't hold back and retorted, "You opposed middle school exams too, but why do you always say such things? Isn't it Mila's only life, and shouldn't we let her do what she wants?" But Asher seemed completely unmoved. After a deliberately loud sigh, he shouted, "No way. Private schools and living alone as a high school student are just a waste of money. If she's not going to a local public high school, I won't support you two financially anymore." That's when I snapped. "Fine then, we'll do as we please, and you have no right to complain," I reassured Mila. "Mom will take care of it. You should apply to the high school you want to attend. You don't need to compromise this time. Okay, do what you feel is right," giving her encouragement once again. However, Mila looked worried and hesitated, but yet after I reassured her with "it'll be okay" multiple times, Mila seemed to have made up her mind. Then, in the spring of the following year, Mila successfully got into her first choice high school. "Mom, I did it," Mila reported with a beaming smile when she returned from school. No parent wouldn't be thrilled to see their child's high school application go well. I cooked her favorite meals and praised Mila a lot, acknowledging there must have been tough times. However, Asher, refusing to celebrate, said something terrible. "As promised, from now on, you take care of Mila and yourself. I won't contribute financially to the household at all," he coldly stated. This and Truly stopped contributing to living expenses. Mila was about to enter a high school dormitory. As for me, I was about to start a new job at a hospital office with the prospect of being hired full-time, so I wasn't worried about finances. Asher's actions didn't bother me anymore. Several months have passed since Mila started her new life in high school. She's adjusted well, which was a relief to hear. I've just started a new job myself, working almost full-time hours as a newcomer, but I'll be promoted to a permanent position soon. Work is challenging, but I'm gradually learning with support from my colleagues, and I've even started studying for a qualification. Life without Asher is much easier, though Asher and I haven't divorced yet. He's moved out to another apartment, and we've been separated for a few months. After getting used to the new life without Asher, I realized I could manage on my own and plan to proceed with the divorce as soon as I'm ready. I'm sure Asher doesn't want to continue this separation either, wanting to end this separation in some way. I went to get a divorce form, but then I received devastating news. My mother back home had passed away. When my father informed me, I was completely shattered. My mother had always been frail, with a history of frequent hospital admissions since I was young. I remembered how my father and I would pray together for my mother's surgery to be successful every time. I knew my mother had been battling cancer for the past year and understood that she didn't have long left. Still, accepting the news of my dear mother's journey's end wasn't immediate. My father, having lost my mother after many years together, was visibly disheartened and had a somber expression. He appeared to lack the energy to serve as the chief mourner, to say the least. So I offered to take on the role myself. Being an only child, there seemed to be no one else suitable for the task. My father weakly smiled at my offer, expressing his gratitude in a fading voice. That helps a lot. Despite the separation, Asher and I hadn't officially divorced, and neither my father nor anyone else had been informed about our situation. It seemed appropriate to have Asher attend the funeral. I quickly opened my smartphone, informed him about my mother, and sent the funeral details via text. But unsurprisingly, there was no reply. On the day of the funeral, Asher was nowhere to be seen. Mila, who had come home for the occasion, muttered the worst under her breath. Even my father, previously drained of energy, was furious at being disrespected by his son-in-law. Though I had many thoughts about Asher, now wasn't the time for them. Both of you, I feel the same way. But are we going to send her off with such scary faces? Mom always said, "A smile is best," I reminded them. My words seemed to bring back memories of my mother laughing and saying just that. We managed to regain our composure and properly send off my mother that night. I got a call back from Asher, who blurted out something completely out of touch with the situation. "The kid is your responsibility now. Take care." What was he talking about? As I remained silent, puzzled, Asher, unprompted, began to talk at length. To put it simply, I was thinking of eloping with her. "She's younger and cuter than you." Seems he was using our current separation to live with his affair partner and wanted to cut ties with me to marry her, especially now that my mother had passed away. Indeed, separation is treated almost like divorce, but to me that no longer mattered. "Oh, is that so? Then do as you please," I said and hung up. 3 days later, I had 23 missed calls from Asher on my smartphone. Believing it wouldn't be anything of substance, I decided not to respond and blocked his number. Perhaps realizing I wasn't going to answer, he sent apologies via social media next. I sighed and embraced a certain resolution. Fine, if that's how you want it, I'll show you how. Not only did he skip my mother-in-law's funeral, but he also chose the moment to declare he was leaving me and Mila. Furthermore, there's no need for sympathy for Asher, who is planning to elope after having an affair. I had decided to pay him back more than double for everything he had done to us. I quickly sent a message saying, "Let's meet tomorrow." The next day, I was waiting for Asher at the cafe we had agreed to meet at. A few minutes later, Asher arrived in a hurry, his face pale and clearly agitated. I had nothing to say to him, so I just silently stared, perhaps even glared at him unwittingly. Thinking I had nothing to say to him, I remained silent, just staring at Asher's face. Actually, I think I was glaring at him unconsciously, intimidated by my uncharacteristically blatant demeanor. Asher slowly began to speak. "I truly regret not being able to attend your mother's funeral, but there's a reason for it." I'm a bit shaken, to say the least. The timing was just bad. As he explained it, turned out that a family member of his had fallen ill yesterday, currently in a critical condition. Surgery could save them, but without it, the outlook was grim. So what if surgery is the only option? Just go through with it. How does that relate to this at all? Asher, grimacing in pain, responded, "It's a complex surgery that regular hospitals can't perform. It's going to cost a lot, and insurance won't cover it." According to Asher, it required advanced medical treatment that would all have to be paid out of pocket. The family decided to pull money, and Asher had to contribute about $10,000. I was astonished. How could he spout such blatant nonsense so easily? It's not my mother-in-law or father-in-law, but some relative I've never even met, right? I coldly snapped back, and Asher turned red with anger. Don't be so cold. You, having lost your mother-in-law, should understand how I feel, right? I understood, but it was an entirely different issue. First off, the timing of your relative's illness right when my mother passed away is suspicious. And is it really a disease that requires advanced medical treatment? What's the diagnosis? How much will the surgery cost in total? As I pressed in with my questions, Asher stumbled over his words and fell silent. My family was well-known landowners locally, and I was aware of the substantial savings in the millions. Even if Asher didn't know the details, he understood that my family was affluent. So I assumed he was after the inheritance. Even if his relative truly needed a significant amount of money for an illness, I couldn't trust Asher based on his past actions. I let out an exaggerated sigh and said, "The only thing between you and me is divorce, then custody and property division. That's it." Asher then desperately cried out, "Wait! I will never make you sad again. Please reconsider." His face twisted, clearly trying to figure out how to turn the situation around. I firmly stated again, "I have no hope for a future with you. If you feel any remorse towards me, please agree to the divorce." Saying that, I stood up, paid only for my coffee, and left the place. That night, Asher had the audacity to show up at our house. "Hey, I know you're there." Open the door. When Asher moved out to start our separation, he said he'd never return and left his keys, so it was natural he couldn't get in. However, at that moment, I was in the bathroom and didn't notice his arrival. Instead, Mila dealt with him. When I sensed something was amiss and went to the entrance, I saw both of them. Mila had been staying with us since the funeral, given it was her summer break. What I saw was Asher sitting down and Mila standing over him like a guardian deity. "What's happening, Asher? What are you doing here?" I asked. Asher looked up, pleading for forgiveness. "Please, I beg you, just $10,000 as an advance on the property division." I thought he had come to apologize, but he was just begging for money. In the end, for Asher, neither Mila's nor my existence mattered at all. I was so frustrated my body nearly moved on its own, but somehow I managed to hold back. I really wanted to scream and chase him away, but I realized running away forever wasn't an option, for Mila's sake. We needed to resolve this separation. After taking a deep breath to calm myself, I said to Asher, "That's irrelevant now. I told you I wouldn't interfere. My family and I handled my mother's funeral, and you had no part in it. So I see no need to take care of a relative of yours I've never even met." After I countered him like that, Asher seemed to lose his words and fell silent. He probably couldn't utter a sound. Despite any hospital stays or funerals in my family, Asher had always remained detached. Yet now that he found himself in a pinch, he wanted my help too convenient. Then, realizing he was getting nowhere with me, Asher turned to Mila, pleading, "Mila, talk to your mom for me. From your perspective, my family isn't irrelevant, right? Come on, you're kind. You'd feel bad knowing a relative is sick, right?" Asher, usually quiet and less talkative, only in such moments. Moreover, he dared to cling to the daughter he was ready to abandon for his affair partner, without even providing for her high school fees. My headache. I had endured so much for Mila's sake, but perhaps it would have been better if we had divorced from the start and lived just the two of us. But it was too late for regrets now. I wondered what Mila thought. Perhaps she might be moved by her father's words and try to persuade me. Yet, feeling embarrassed for even considering it for a moment, I sternly declared, "Who are you?" Both Asher and I were taken aback by her words. Not rejection, not comforting, but outright denying his existence. Watching Mila's composed face, I felt relieved. I was moved by the sight of my daughter grown so strong. As she continued without looking at Asher, she said, "Didn't you tell Mom the kid is her problem? You've essentially renounced your parental rights. You're divorcing Mom and going with your affair partner, right?" It seemed Mila had overheard our phone conversation. I had been careful to make sure she couldn't hear, but Mila must have had her own thoughts about her father not attending the funeral. Given the separation, the affair, and him saying he didn't need her, Mila declared that the man was nothing more than a stranger to her, not a father at all. This left Asher deeply wounded, and he froze on the spot, unable to move. Seeing him like this, Mila sighed dramatically and glared at Asher disdainfully. "After all the ways you've interfered with my future, can you not play the father now to me? My mom is the only parent I have. Someone like you, who didn't even come to my beloved grandmother's funeral, means nothing to me." I watched as Asher, who had been crouching silently, slowly began to understand Mila's words. His face turned as red as a demon's, and he stood up, glaring at Mila. "You ungrateful child," he shouted. "Do you have any idea how much I've sacrificed for you? If you're going to talk like that, then give back all the tuition fees I've paid up until middle school." What an immature response. Where in the world is there a parent who demands tuition fees back when raising a child is a parent's duty? The fact that he was my husband made my skin crawl. Asher, looking like he wanted to say something, approached us. Perhaps sensing fear, Mila stepped back step by step. But then the sound of a police car siren could be heard, and it stopped in front of our apartment. Asher halted and slowly turned around. There were the neighbors with even more terrifying expressions than Asher's focused on Asher. I hadn't realized I left the front door wide open. The apartment walls are thin, and it was evening when many people were home. It seems the neighbors, hearing the commotion, had called the police. Realizing the police had come for him, Asher suddenly became flustered, losing his previous bravado. The police officer who stepped out of the car came straight to us to hear the story. The neighbors had reported Asher as a suspicious person. My relationship with the neighbors has always been good. When I mentioned my mother's funeral, they even asked to come and pay their respects. Naturally, they asked about Asher's absence, and I answered honestly. Recently, the neighbors knew they hadn't seen Asher around and had unanimously condemned him after hearing my story. Despite all that, when they suddenly heard a commotion at the entrance, they didn't hesitate to call the police. Asher always said he didn't need neighbors, but at that moment, I was grateful we were on good terms with them. Even though the police generally don't intervene in civil matters, they didn't just leave the scene irresponsibly. Asher desperately tried to clear up the misunderstanding with the police, saying, "No, it's not what it looks like. I'm the head of this household. What's wrong with coming back to my house where my wife and daughter are?" Because he said this with such an innocent look, the onlookers booed him, and the police had to calm them down before asking me if what Asher was saying was true. I answered honestly, "It's embarrassing to say, but we're separated, and it seems he already has someone else. So we were ready for divorce at any time. I've even prepared the divorce papers." The police officer, believing my story, urged Asher to return to his current residence. The neighbors, watching from a distance, radiated a get-out-of-here vibe. Despite wanting to say something, Asher stayed put, to which I said, "This isn't solving anything. When we separated, this house was put in my name, and I've been the one paying the rent, so don't just barge in." Asher was left speechless again. Mila, backing me up, said to the officer, "This man is scary." It seemed that was the last straw. Considering Mila is a minor and should be protected, the police sternly told Asher, "Dad, it's time to go." Faced with adversity, Asher realized resistance was futile and dejectedly left. 2 weeks after Asher's visit, I consulted a lawyer about the situation and decided to seek their help with the divorce. It would have been better if Asher was willing to talk, but given his behavior, it seemed unlikely. The lawyer agreed, confirming my decision was right. Finally, the day came to talk with Asher again. He was downcast, but I didn't hesitate and silently handed him the documents. Asher, puzzled, read through them and was shocked by what he saw. "What? How did you find out about this?" The document outlined a claim for damages against Asher. All of Asher's previous behavior was a complete lie. The only truth was his affair, but he had been persuaded by that woman to stage a drama. If your mother-in-law has passed away, your wife will inherit, right? Just shake her up a bit, and you'll get some money. When faced with a large sum, people tend to want to settle things with money. For our marriage's sake, let's put on a little act. How about trying to get, say, $110,000? The claim that a family member needed advanced medical treatment due to illness was a lie. It was a fabricated scenario created to swindle money from me. At that time, I just couldn't shake off the feeling of discomfort. After the funeral, Asher called me with an air of nonchalance, clearly intending to break up. But then, as soon as dawn broke, he came crying back to me. I suspected there was more to it, trusting my instincts. Right after Asher's call, I secretly hired a detective for a background check. Emboldened by confessing his affair, Asher made no attempt to hide evidence, making gathering proof effortless. His audacity increased after admitting to the affair, as he was captured toasting to our 5th year together with his mistress, revealing that he had been cheating even before our separation and for over 5 years. Asher, realizing his lies were exposed, began to tremble uncontrollably, dropping the document stack onto the table. His eyes became vacant, and he could only move his mouth silently. After about 5 minutes, he managed to say, "What should I do?" Leaning forward as if I had been waiting for this moment, I stated, "I'll be claiming approximately $330,000 from you for the mental distress you've caused me." The amounts were the maximum that could be individually claimed. Asher started to panic, saying, "I can't pay that amount. It would ruin my life." But I had anticipated this. I proposed, "Then let's settle through property division. However, child support is separate. You'll be paying for all of Mila's expenses, including high school and university fees." Facing Asher's impossible denial, I intensified the pressure. "If you default on the payments, I'll go to court for enforcement. Then your employer will be notified, and your salary will be garnished." Clearly troubled by this, Asher had no choice but to sign the documents prepared by my lawyer. Bringing an end to our long battle, Asher and I officially divorced, resolving financial matters through a settlement in lieu of alimony. Asher had squandered his savings on his mistress, allowing me to safeguard the savings I had diligently accumulated. This ordeal left Asher penniless upon divorce, a significant blow to him. However, he diligently pays the child support monthly, likely fearing workplace embarrassment. Mila, perhaps despite him, excelled academically and gained admission to a prestigious private university. I can only imagine Asher's face when presented with the tuition bill. Asher was arrested and convicted on charges of marriage fraud. It seems he had deceived others too, hinting at marriage to multiple victims. Asher lost everything: family, money, his girlfriend, and even his home and social relationships. If Asher had known that a single thrill-seeking adventure outside his marriage would lead to such despair, he probably wouldn't have done it. He just lacked that foresight. Now he's reduced to a lonely life, merely shoveling between work and home, paying child support monthly. Apparently, his colleagues and neighbors, informed through local gossip, view him with disdain. Underestimating rural networks was his downfall, a lesson Asher learned the hard way. I returned to my family home, living a peaceful life, supporting my father. One day, as Mila's college graduation approached, she introduced her boyfriend, a seemingly kind and pleasant young man. My father moved to tears by the prospect of his granddaughter's marriage, and I finally felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Months later, as Mila, dressed in a pristine white gown, was about to walk down the aisle, she turned to me with tears in her eyes and said, "Mom, thank you for raising me. I promise I'll be happy." Being able to attend my beloved daughter Mila's wedding filled me with emotion. Having parted ways with a terrible husband, witnessing Mila in her wedding dress was all I needed to feel fulfilled. I resolved to cherish every minute and second of the rest of my life.